these statutory review criteria are going to be the most relevant to us and helpful to us, because these are what we are looking at in making our determination. Also in the back of the room is the hearing registration slip. If you would like to present testimony to the department, please fill out that registration hearing slip and give it to me at any time. So just come up at any time and give it to me. I'd be happy to take it, and what we'll do is take testimony in the order in which I receive those slips. This form helps us manage time as well as keep track of who testified. Because this public hearing is being recorded by a court reporter, when you testify, please be sure to spell your name, and please be mindful when you are speaking to speak clearly so that your comments may be recorded, and that you're not speaking too quickly as well. Is there any members of the public who may need to leave early, because we can take your testimony first? All right, again, feel free to give me those public testimony slips at any time, but what we're going to do is we're going to start introductions of DOA staff. So like I said, I'm Dawn Vick with the Department of Administration, Division of Intergovernmental Relations.
I'm Renee Powers. I lead the plat review and municipal boundary review program for the department.
I'm Eric Shelby. I work in the boundary review program. I'm David Robbie. I'm the attorney with the Department of Legal Services.
All right, and then who is here from the town of Waukesha?
Welcome to the town of Waukesha. I'm Brian, B-R-I-A-N, Fisher, F-I-S-C-H-E-R. I'm the current town chairman. Would you like me to introduce other folks from the town of Waukesha?
Please. You can do it now.
Okay, thank you. At the table to your right, to my left, Mike Durr, D-O-E-R-R, who's one of our four town supervisors. Kathy Nicholas, who is our clerk treasurer. John Macy, M-A-C-E-Y, is our town attorney. Not only is he our town attorney, he's also the town of Vernon town attorney, so he's wearing two hats today. He's sitting on this side, but the bill is going over there, so for that. Jump to the back of the room. Sean Malarkey, you're doing bit shy today. S-H-A-U-N-M-U-L-A-R-K-E-Y is our town planner. He also is the town planner for the town of Vernon. A lot of common threads here. Bob Stigler, S-T-I-G-L-E-R, is one of our town supervisors. Did I miss anybody? I think that's it. Thank you. We appreciate you being here. Just a reminder, I didn't do it, but you've got microphones there if you'd like to use those. I think they're on. Feel free to use all.
Thank you. Town of Vernon.
Good afternoon. I'm Carl Fortner, town chairman. I've got in the audience here Gary Wildy, town supervisor. Fred Mahalik, town supervisor. We have our clerk treasurer Karen Shue here as well, and we may have one or two other supervisors coming sometime this afternoon.
All right, thank you. City of Waukesha.
I'm Kevin Laner, L-A-H-N-E-R, city administrator. I have Jennifer Andrews, our director of community development, and Mayor Riley will be coming as well later. And I brought the security detail again.
You had so much fun the other night, you came back for more.
Might see you next week.
All right, thank you. So what we're going to do is we are going to hear from the town of Waukesha and Vernon first. So who'd like to go first, Waukesha or Vernon? Vernon?
Yeah, we flipped a coin. Good afternoon. We appreciate the opportunity to provide comments to the Department of Administration on the Town of Vernon, Town of Waukesha Cooperative Plan. Again, I'm Carl Fortner, the Town of Vernon chairperson. The Vernon Town Board has authorized me to speak on behalf of the Town of Vernon and its residents. Brian Fisher of the Town of Waukesha will speak next. You may remember me from last fall, as on behalf of the Town of Vernon, I provided highly critical comments on the Town of Vernon Village of Mukwonago Cooperative Plan at your September public hearing. In sharp contrast to that agreement is this agreement, which is the subject of today's public hearing, the Town of Vernon, Town of Waukesha Cooperative Plan. Residents of the Town of Vernon and the Town of Waukesha approve of this plan. All comments made by residents at our public hearing last October were in support of this plan. No residents requested a referendum. No citizens group petitioned for a referendum. There was not a 90+% referendum vote against this cooperative plan. No resident requested a public hearing for this hearing. This plan meets the statutory criteria for DOA approval and thus is sufficient to enable the DOA to approve this plan. The town of Vernon and the town of Waukesha have entered into a cooperative plan. It sets the border between our two towns exactly where the border is today and has been for over 175 years, and checking the dates, it's really 181 years since it was set back in 1839. The plan provides for an advisory committee for land use planning in a joint planning area and for shared services to identify what municipal services can be more efficiently and economically delivered. A public hearing was held on October 24 of 2019. Public comments made at the hearing, including the City of Waukesha's written comments, were fully considered by both of our town boards. Changes were made to the agreement based on these comments. The modified agreement was unanimously approved by both of the town boards of Vernon and Waukesha and sent to you, the Department of Administration, for review and approval on December 23rd, 2019. As stated, not one resident requested a public hearing with the DOA, unlike the Village of Mukwonago agreement where we had 18 residents requesting a public hearing. Instead, the City of Waukesha, a governmental entity, requested a public hearing. This request was certainly not authorized directly by the City of Waukesha residents. So next, then I will start with our little PowerPoint here. I'll summarize why the town of Vernon and Waukesha meet the statutory criteria. And just for clarification, when I refer to Waukesha, I'm referring to the town of Waukesha, not the city. If I mention the city, I'll say city. Otherwise, it's referencing the town of Waukesha. When I reference a section number, it's in the cooperative plan, unless I say it's a statute or something. And so let's start here. The content, like I say, meets the statutory criteria for approval, and it is sufficient for you to approve it. Section 4 establishes the historical existing boundary as the boundary. Section 4 also explains how the boundary maintained under this plan is not the result of arbitrariness and reflects due consideration for the compact of the area. It's right in our cooperative plan. Section 5 describes how the plan is consistent with Vernon's and Waukesha's comprehensive land use plan. Vernon and Waukesha's comprehensive land use plans are attached as exhibits I and J. Exhibit G is a letter from our outside professional land use planner who was introduced, Sean Malarkey at Foth, describing how the cooperative plan is consistent with one another. Section 5 also creates an advisory committee for land use planning and a joint planning area. And you'll see the joint planning area in the plan. It's up there, if you can see it on the slide. It's basically a half a mile on each side of the joint border. And this is created so that a dialogue and input from both communities on the land that is common in that 1 mile strip on our common border, so that we can stay consistent with one another in our land use, comprehensive land use plans. Vernon can certainly, and so can the town of Waukesha, certainly provide additional information during our written comment period on those land use plans, should that be necessary. Section 6 and Section 7D and G explain how adequate provisions are made in the cooperative plan for the delivery of the necessary municipal services. It describes the services to be provided, how the services will be provided, identifies the providers of those services, and includes a schedule for delivery of those services, and indicating that all approvals by any relevant government regulatory authority has been received. Sorry about that. Section 6 also establishes a shared services committee to identify what municipal services can be more efficiently and economically delivered, including jointly purchasing capital equipment. I do notice we've had our fire chiefs here from both from the town of Vernon, and they're very interested in the shared services, and Mr. Fisher will also have comments about that. Section 7I describes how the cooperative plan is consistent with current state and federal laws, county shoreline zoning, municipal regulations and administrative rules. Section 70 identifies the highways within Vernon and Waukesha. Section 10 specifies the duration of the plan as perpetual and explains and provides justification for that planning period because it exceeds 10 years. In sum, the content of the cooperative plan meets the statutory criteria for approval and is sufficient to enable the DOA to approve the plan. Thank you, and I would also like to thank the residents, all the residents from the town of Vernon and the town of Waukesha in advance for your interest in this extremely important agreement, and look forward to your comment. As stated, written comments can be emailed or sent to the DOA within 10 days or February 24th. The Department of Administration has 90 days, as stated, from submission to determine whether to approve the agreement, or March 23rd, 2020. With respect to the determination date, we respectively request an earlier determination than the statutory deadline. I'm also happy to answer any questions. Otherwise, Mr. Fisher will speak next. Do you have any questions at this point? Mr. Fisher?
Thank you, Carl. Again, my name is Brian Fisher. I'm the current chairman of the town of Waukesha. Thank you for the opportunity to speak this afternoon at this public hearing on behalf of more than 9,000 constituents that I have the privilege to serve. A little bit about me. It's not particularly relevant information, but just a bit of a get to know. My wife and I built a house in the town of Waukesha in 1981 in which we continued to live. We raised 3 good kids in that house. They all now pay taxes, thank goodness. Eileen and I continue to operate an architectural and engineering firm, which was founded in 1956 by my deceased father on land in the town of Waukesha in a small family-owned commercial building complex, which my father built over 50 years ago, and into which he moved his practice. If you want to see me in the role of being a quintessential deep-rooted baby boomer, I'm not offended. So that's a bit about me. I've been a member of the Plan Commission of the town of Waukesha since the mid-1980s. Some might say too long, but we'll leave that discussion for another day. I was elected to the town board in 2011 and elected to the position of town chairman last April. And that's enough about me. Chairman Fortner of the town of Vernon, in my estimation, knocked it out of the park. He touched all the bases, rounded third, and crossed home plate standing up. He made a compelling presentation, missing nothing. There's no need to repeat all of the things which he said this afternoon in an effort to be economical about our use of time, but I am going to give you a little bit of insight into a recent cooperative interactive effort that the town of Waukesha and the town of Vernon undertook, and then I'm also going to touch base just on 2 issues of concern to which he alluded. Regarding that recent cooperative interaction, approximately 2 years ago, the town of Vernon and the town of Waukesha engaged in a lengthy, detailed, collaborative discussion about sharing public works services. We got quite deep down the path. We found out some interesting things. We found out many things that we have in common and some things that we don't in terms of equipment and personnel and things that we could share. That agreement is yet to be perfected, but it is a good foundation going forward. We learned an awful lot about each other's communities. That's an area in which we believe there could be great intergovernmental cooperation, which could lead to efficiency and better delivery of service. So that's a project uncompleted, but it's yet on the boards. Regarding 2 issues of concern. The first issue of concern that I have is constituency and proximity. The city of Waukesha requested this public hearing, as everyone in the room knows. I'm not here to question their right to do so. I mean, it's clearly provided for by statute. But I am here to ask you to take note of the fact that they are not a constituent of either the town of Vernon or the town of Waukesha. The closest part of the city of Waukesha is miles away from the boundary that is the subject of this public hearing. The second issue of concern, at least from my perspective, is motivation. Lacking constituency and proximity, why did the city of Waukesha request this public hearing? Are they going to make a presentation shortly in support of the cooperative agreement? Don't bet your life savings on that. Assuming that they're going to make a presentation in opposition to the proposed cooperative agreement, what is their true motivation for doing so? Will the city be forthcoming and provide an honest answer to that question? Probably not. Instead, will the city of Waukesha attempt to muddy the water? Probably so. I would like to ask the city of Waukesha to reveal their true motivation for opposing the cooperative agreement, but given the format of this public hearing, I cannot ask that question of them directly. You, however, could pose that question to them, and I think you should. Thank you for the opportunity to address you. Please give some thoughtful consideration to what I have said, and thank you.
All right, I do have a question for you. So you talked about your previous efforts, and the last few years you've already been talking about, you know, the sharing of services. So why do you need this plan to form a committee that would talk about sharing services if it's something you're already doing without a plan?
I think the committee would be a good mechanism and forward to continue forward that discussion as well as others. I think that would be a way to formalize it, and I think it's the next logical step forward.
Okay.
Any other questions? Thank you.
All right, City of Waukesha.
Thank you again for hearing from us today. We did request a public hearing as is available under the state statutes. We are again raising serious objections to the cooperative plan between the town of Waukesha and the town of Vernon. Generally speaking, it doesn't meet the requirements of 660307 sub 5 sub C of the Wisconsin state statute. Is not an agreement that meets those state statutes, and in several areas it is inadequate. In short, the proposed cooperative plan is simply a statement of the status quo. The cooperative plan does not call for the sharing of water or sewer services, specifically because neither community provides those services to their residents presently. It only states that the providing of water and sewer services would be discussed if it becomes necessary in the future. The proposed cooperative plan also forms an informal advisory body whose determinations and recommendations are not binding on either town for the study of future shared services outside the services already shared. The cooperative plan simply lists areas where they already share services and indicates sharing of additional services will be explored through a, quote, informal advisory body, unquote, only. The proposed plan is not a plan at all, but a plan to make a plan. The document does not meet the high standard of section 66037 sub 5 sub C of the state statutes. The establishment of a shared town border does not require a plan. The proposed plan is between two towns, neither of which can annex land of the other. The boundary between the two towns can be altered only by a mutual agreement of the parties. It cannot be forced by one on the other, so there's no need for an agreement to solidify the border. There's no need for a cooperative plan to form the joint planning committee. The decisions of the joint planning committee are informal and advisory only, as indicated in the cooperative plan. And there is no need for a cooperative plan if the committee is serving only in an informal and advisory role. There's also no need for a JPC if the planning period is in perpetuity. No boundary is ever going to change between the town's respective borders, and the respective comprehensive plans are already consistent. The plan also does not describe how disputes over proposed land uses will be resolved, as the joint planning committee consists of 2 members from each community. In the event that a vote on a land use is 2-2, which is a real possibility given the perpetual nature of the community, nothing in the plan notes how such an impasse would be overcome. This further illustrates the unnecessary nature of the joint planning area and the committee. It also does not meet other requirements of the statute, such as review by the Waukesha County Parks and Land Use Department or the Southeast Wisconsin Regional Planning Commission. Those are required, and as indicated in their application, they did not submit those reviews to you because they have not been done. So basically, our objection is that proposed plan is not a cooperative plan. It does not fairly inform the town's residents of the purpose of the plan or its potential effects on them. It does not provide enough detail for neighboring municipalities to fairly evaluate its purpose and effects. And we would just strongly urge you to reject the plan, as it does not meet the statutory requirements under the statutes. I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And I have not received any testimony slips from the public. You both made your opening statement, towns of Waukesha and Vernon. So until we receive public testimony slips, we will stand informal. Otherwise, we will come back. Okay. I remember you. Thank you. It's all right. So, Mr. Whipple, if you're ready.
Excuse me. All right. Okay. My name is Jeff Whipple, W-H-I-P-P-L-E. I am a town of Waukesha resident, have been for over 5 years, I believe. And therefore I am a constituent of the town, and would have requested a public hearing, or at least gotten together with other folks to do so, had I known about this earlier. I've been busy working and going about my normal life, and just learned about this recently. Not excited to be here. I don't really want to be here going against the town in which I live. Kind of pains me to have to do so. But I'm a commercial real estate developer. I've been so for about 14 years, worked in this area, in the general Waukesha area for some time. I'm also a NAIOP, Wisconsin board member. NAIOP is N-A-I-O-P. It's one of those that started out as an acronym but doesn't mean anything anymore. Basically, NAIOP is a trade association for the commercial real estate development community. Represents developers as well as other service providers like lawyers, title companies, brokers, and so forth. We have over 400 members in the state of Wisconsin, primarily in Milwaukee and also Madison. So I apologize for being a little bit late to the party, but I have gone through the plan, came to many of the same conclusions as you heard here from the city. In my reading of the plan, I'm not an attorney, so I won't be able to speak much to the statutory requirements, really just kind of my overall feelings of the plan. It appears to just maintain status quo. Doesn't really seem to be anything new here. So I'm not really sure what the purpose of this plan is. The towns don't have the ability to annex each other's property. as towns. This would really only be relevant if one of the municipalities were incorporated and the other was not. The area about services that has been mentioned, it doesn't make any changes to services, any of the shared services. Again, it's the status quo moving forward. The towns seem to be cooperating just fine as it is without this cooperative plan. So I'm not sure why another layer of government needs to be added. Going back to NAOP, as a member of NAOP and as a board member as well as co-chair of the NAOP Wisconsin Public Policy Committee, we work very hard to make an environment that is favorable for developers, obviously. And one of those that we work to do is to try to eliminate excess government, excess bureaucracy. This plan is really kind of the opposite of the best of both worlds. It's really kind of the worst of both worlds. It lacks clarity and specifics, while adding an additional layer of bureaucracy for developers to have to deal with. This is the type of additional layers of government that NAOP works hard to reduce and or eliminate. So those are my comments. Obviously I don't support this plan as it exists today. I don't really see the need for it. So thank you.
All right, thank you. So any additional public testimony slips? Hello.
How are you?
Good. Thank you. So, Mr. Feld?
Yes, Feldy.
Feldy,
Grab my paper.
when you're ready.
Just wanted to make a couple general comments in regards. There's been a lot of things mentioned about shared services. I'm a resident of the town of Waukesha, but I'm also the fire chief for the town of Vernon. So I'm in a unique position that I am affected by both communities' decisions. I think that the idea of a cooperative agreement is a very good idea. It helps us as an administrator of a department to be able to forecast for the future. It's hard to try to develop and maintain capital plans, things like station improvements, things like that, without knowing what the future is going to hold. Annexations are a constant threat to townships. I live in a township that's been basically eaten alive by the city of Waukesha. Our borders are very jigsawy because of the fact that the city has annexed a lot of different properties and has created not only questions for people whether they don't know where they live or not, but response issues from a professional standpoint. The fact that the city has chosen to oppose this plan is not a surprise, because obviously if there is a cooperative agreement and the towns can work together, it improves our position being able to incorporate. And obviously once we do incorporate, then they're not allowed to annex any further of our property. But from a professional standpoint, I think the ability of our two towns to be able to work together, we've already started those processes. It's hard to forecast being able to do things in the future when you don't have a good idea of what your future will hold. Will your tax base be considerably lower because a commercial developer here like Whiplet wants to take and develop 100 and some acres of property that gets annexed out of the town into the city and makes a huge density impact of, say, 2 houses per acre versus some of our houses. My house sits on almost 2 acres of land. My neighbors are the same thing. We have a much lesser density of population. So with that being said, I think that you guys need to consider the fact that if we're given the opportunity to work together, to develop cooperative plans, we can continue to do the good things that serve our customers, our residents of both townships. We provide service at a cost-effective rate. We work together very well. We're both members of our joint dispatch center. something that, again, the city of Waukesha opposes, because they want their own autonomy. So I think that if you give us the opportunity to kind of decide our destiny and let our people decide, and if we are able to grow as communities together, it's going to benefit us, the ones who live here, not the people who don't. And that's important to us, the residents who are currently paying taxes in these townships. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any additional public testimony slips? Mr. Ham? He reintroduced himself to me earlier. Yes, so Mr. Ham, when you're ready.
Yes, I'm a resident of the town of Waukesha, as I said 2 days ago. And I'm sort of the antithesis of a developer. I would consider myself more of a preservationist, which many in the town board and planning commission know, much to their chagrin. I'm willing to work with growth, but I think it needs to be done at a proper rate. And I do see the city standing at the border, ready to take the next person that wants to develop the land. And so, you know, the elephant in the room is that the city is objecting, and I'll answer Mr. Fisher's question, why, is because they don't want the town to be able to lock their borders. It's very simple. And I understand what they're doing, and I have, you know, I've paid taxes this year in the city. I understand why. They're protecting their interests, and the town is trying to protect their interests. And this town will dissolve in time by being nibbled away, and what they're trying to do is sustain themselves. And that's what I'd like. I live in the town. I've been here 35 years and live in a very rural area, only on 3 acres, but it's very nice. It's what we want, and we're trying to keep that type of lifestyle. It says up above you, a great place to live. If I'd wanted to move to the city, I would have done so. So, and I think, and I've been, you know, to joint review boards about the TID. I've been to the school district meetings, the finance and facility meetings. I've been to these meetings, and the city shows up or writes letters or is suing the town over anything they can do because they want to find somebody that they can hang their hat on one of the objections. But none of the objections that I read, I think, are genuine. And I did submit in writing today to Madison, and I'll just read a little bit of part of it. The city likes to say that the town's various efforts are only to incorporate. That is not true. While incorporation and the protection of borders is a goal, the various efforts by the town stand on their own. What is true is that the only thing the city wants to do is stop the town's incorporation so that they can continue to nibble away at the town's tax base until ultimately the town collapses. I do not believe they truly care, based on any of their stated concerns, as to supposed deficiencies in the town's application. They are just searching for one thing, for one body to hang its hat on to deny the town's efforts. And I encourage you to give favorable consideration to an application that was approved unanimously by both towns. I've been to the meetings, the public hearings, for no one objected. We have a latecomer coming today that says he would have, but he hadn't been here. The rest of us have all approved this, and I really encourage you to give it serious consideration. Thank you very much for your time.
All right, thank you. Any additional public testimony slips? Hello, sir. How are you? All right, Mr. Wildy or
Yeah,
Wildy?
just like the car dealer. Only I wish I was, but I aren't.
Please
my name
spell
is
your name
my
out.
name is Gary, Gary Wilde. I'm a Town of Vernon supervisor, Town of Vernon resident for 43 years. Last appeared before you when you were at our town in regard to the Village of Mugwanago boundary agreement, which I supported wholeheartedly, which was found to be insufficient. I naturally went along with the decision since we didn't have much choice, but I'm here today to support this agreement with the town of Vernon and the town of Waukesha. I believe it's in the best interests of both communities. to protect our borders. We all know why this thing is about. It has to do with incorporation, and the incorporation of both the town of Vernon and the town of Waukesha. We need boundary agreements in order to make this a possibility. And I can understand the city is stepping in and wanting to object to this as the basis of the towns were originally established to provide a land bank for cities and villages. And to this day, they still do that. You can take your property into a community if the community accepts it for annexation. And as we know with the town of Brookfield, which is shrunk down to probably maybe about 2-3 miles out of the original 36, we can see that basically eventually the towns disappear. I believe that for all purposes, this process is not good for the communities. They need to be able to establish their own boundaries to make sure that it's efficient. They can take care of their tax base, take care of their residents, provide the services, and have a life feel free from constant pressure of trying to defend their borders. I think that would be enough of my comments. I'm heartily in favor of this agreement, and I look forward to seeing your decision. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any additional public testimony at this time? All right, then what we'll do is we will check in again in about 20 minutes to see if there's public testimony. Feel free to bring your slips up to me, and we can do the public testimony right away. But we'll do a periodic check-in until we receive additional slips, and then we'll try to do closing comments about 5 o'clock if we don't receive anything else. Thank you. All right, hello everyone. It's 4 o'clock, and I said we'd come back and check and see if we had any additional public testimony slips at 4, and I've received one. So we will hear public testimony from Michael Dare.
Good afternoon. My name is Michael Durham, a town of Waukesha resident and a member of the town board since 2014. There's been a lot of talk about how this cooperative agreement is nothing merely but a statement of the status quo. And I don't see exactly how that would preclude us from coming to an agreement or an arrangement on a border agreement when we do have what I would consider a cooperative status quo with our neighbor. The one thing I know for sure is that status quo never stays the status quo. And every time that there's a new election and new leadership takes over for either of the town boards, things change. So right now we have an environment where we have 2 town boards and 2 town chairmen, and all the town board members and all the town, on both town boards seem to be getting along, and would be an important time to solidify our relationship. And that is a perfect opportunity to take the status quo when you're in a time of cooperation, codify it, and put it into place. Another important reason to maintain or to codify the status quo is that should one of the towns ever become a city or a village, that certainly protects the other from the annexation that we all live in fear of when you're in a town. So it would seem to be the perfect opportunity to put this border agreement in place. You all sitting in front of me today know this statute much better than I do, but I was not aware that sewer and water were a requirement or a statutory requirement for a border agreement. So I didn't exactly understand the city's position as to the sewer and water component. If I am in error about that statutory requirement, I apologize. And finally, I don't quite understand why the city has a position to tell us what we should and should not have in our border agreement. We live almost monthly under the threat of the city of Waukesha through their extraterritorial zoning, their threats to do this, their threats to do that. They're putting in water mains, and if you don't approve it, we'll do it anyway because we can. And they just have not been a very good neighbor. I think many of the surrounding communities are starting to experience that. And I don't quite understand why the city thinks that it should be their position to come in and tell us how we have and what should and should not be in our border agreement with a neighbor that they don't even share a border with. I wonder out loud if the city of Waukesha requested a public hearing or had a position on the border agreement between the town of Emmett and the city of Watertown, or between the town of New Richmond, the city of New Richmond and the town of Star Prairie, or the recent agreement between the town of Delafield, the village of Heartland, and the city of Delafield. Those are all border agreements that the city does not share borders with. So I wonder out loud if they had an opinion about going over to those communities and telling them what should and should be in their agreements. I suspect the answer to that is no, although I did not check to see if they requested a public hearing for those border agreements. So I thank you for your time.
All right, thank you. Any additional public testimony slips? All right, I will check in with you again and let you know if we receive any in the meantime in probably 10-15 minutes. Thank you.
So
No, the wrong one. Oh. Probably that more like. Sounds fine. She's fine. She's gonna have surgery next Thursday. She didn't have her knee replaced. Oh, back then? Yeah, so I was probably 35, 40, whatever surgery is scheduled for. Yeah. Well, I understand. Well, she went to Providence at Dr. would like to just at orthopedic area, but it'd be cheaper. Medicare would pay for it. Plus it's done in the hospital. So she's got to be in the hospital. And it's paid recognition. Right, so you're lots of more work for years. Cooking, cleaning, laundry. Down the stairs. She won't be able to. Yeah, we're very lucky. She would have like one step to get in and out. Yeah, yeah. But not down the basement. We do. Okay. Yeah. I figure I could get in at least 5 minutes. No, not even. You could just move it up. Your time versus my next elevation. You're about like $4 an hour. The sky. Oh. I certainly hope so. Yeah.
Yeah, you don't do that job for the money.
I think it's stuck with me. Yeah, I'm gonna stick around for the next rally. Yeah. Okay.
All right, everyone, it's 20 after 4. Just doing a check-in to make sure there's no additional public testimony slips. It's okay, you can say what you're doing because there's not. So, but I did say I was going to check in every 20 minutes or so, so we'll come back about 4:40 just to see, and then we'll do, those remarks from the towns at 5 o'clock, and we are here till 6 no matter what. You don't need to stay, but we need to stay. So, so know that's coming. So we'll talk again in 20 minutes unless we receive public testimony slips in the meantime. Thank you. No, I would not.
Is this one of these, truth moments? A few good men. And then you go from there with the state Supreme Court, if you get credit. I couldn't get any because I would go to jail. I'd be hanging everywhere. Guilty. Accident. Well, certain people. Yeah, that's a pain. Did you guys hear the lady was caught now for the little man? I know. Come with you. Because the rumor is that the police chief is oh boy. By the end of the year. No, he's retired from the office. He's district captain for the beach. Well, that was the rumor. So he was trying to position himself so he could take over the newspaper. Self-appointed, yeah. He's like Borat. Another one. He was before my time. Yeah, this could be a board job. Hello? He's working with Sean. When I'm gone, you'll be able to share if you treat me now. Percentages are based on my favoritism.
Oh, they all say they're.
Well, I tell my mother-in-law that all the time. I am number one son-in-law. She's like, yeah, right. I know. She starts talking about her will. I don't want your money. Yeah, I just want your love. I don't want your money. Make me some bars. Maybe any of my heart bars or something. Oh, she could cook like you wouldn't believe. Really? They grew up on dairy farm. She lived on dairy farm for 50 years. My father-in-law had 10 brothers and sisters, and they all lived within 10 miles of the homestead still. In a town called Dorchester, just north of Abbotsford and South Medford. My father-in-law, they're all main farmers, and they all lived within 10 miles of the original homestead. She had not big of a family. Some of her family was from Medford and some of her down towards the south. But hers were like 2 nurses, 3 nurses. When you go to Christmas at Grandma's side, not my kid's grandma's, my grandma's, Jack's grandma's, people, it's crazy. They rent the town hall every Christmas, every Thanksgiving, meet in the little town hall. That's where they have all their functions. I mean, it's crazy. Well, I mean, she's not just because my in-law grandma, she has, I want to say 80-some grandkids. 25 great grandmas. Oh, that's fine. It's cold up there.
Stay warm as ever.
Yeah.
How long has your wife been here?
I don't know. She's talking about taking a job here. Next couple of years. We'll build a lake house somewhere. She can just kind of back and forth.
She really wants to get you back with her for a year?
Yeah. Her aunt runs 6 Marshall Clinic sites. She's like a big room. So she said, whenever you want to start your hire, my wife hates it. Abigail Laura sucks.
No, she said
No, she's a friend.
oh, that's good. Of course, she doesn't do that.
Yeah, she does all that stuff. Oh, and I'm telling you, some of the stuff she tells me, she doesn't tell me names, but some of the stuff that she does, she does lesion removal and stuff, I mean, all kinds of weird stuff. Like a Dr. Pimple Popper, she does some of that. I'm like, that's disgusting.
You must do weird stuff too.
Oh yeah, we used to buy weird stuff too, but not like that.
First thing we talk about when we come.
Hello, everyone. It is the 4:40 check-in, and just to let you know, I've not received any additional public testimony slips, but if we do receive any, I will take them, and we can work on that as we get them. Otherwise, we'll come back at 5 o'clock. Thank you.
She's trouble. Her and the Pope don't go together. So I wonder, did they all drive down? I always like to go last. My daughter is sneaking in here, so, or maybe she'll come at 5:30. But that's all right. Kind of scribbled out. Wasn't he here today? If I repeat, so that's fine. You know. Yeah, is that good? That was it. Talk about the common law. Service. 3 years. City of Waukesha, out of law school. You get that. It's good that you're trying to give you that specific stuff. Sewer, status quo is not advisor. See it on shelf, right? You go drive over services without a cooperative plan. Makes you that part of it, they'll call and do something makes them happy. Well, because they sit there and talk about it. Well, sure, accountability plan. Well, that must have meant they just have all this part of the we'll give you a 4-minute response. Now you're giving us 15, 20 minutes. Actually, I have 2 phones. It's possible they may say this, and if they do, we'll just forward it up. I think she's been around here for this. Mateo's, yeah. chargebacks for legal review, is this ready to go to legal review? I didn't think it was, because of these three things. Would you mind to rewrite it? Yeah. And send it back, and we'll get it to legal review on the rewrite? Courtesy and common sense.
Sorry, you loitering. Business is business, my friend.
No parking on the side of the road.
Right, yep, yeah. Abandoned vehicle tag. Hey, don't shoot the messenger.
Won't go on as my hands are tied.
Yep.
Oh, that's always good. We stopped on the front wall. You have to do that? The food truck's on the way.
Right.
He said he's coming.
Is it a state trooper?
Yeah.
Nope, got Those things are hard to get off the car. They don't just like, you're like with a razor blade trying to peel them off. You got the WD-40. Yeah.
I've never gotten one.
Well, you never broke down, never good car maintenance.
I got pulled over. But I pulled over. I'm going back to the scale, you got pulled over.
Really? You cried too right away?
No, I didn't cry, but it's like, I'll follow you, ma'am.
Crying doesn't work. It does if you're a guy.
I bet he's getting it.
Did you get me? Right?
Right.
See you guys.
Bye, Chief.
You only can do what you can do, right? Yeah, he's got people stains and stuff, so I don't know. Must have his reasons. But take a look at it if you've got any questions. That being said, yeah, we just got our state approval this past week for building stuff, so we'll get running on that. Thanks, Chief.
Take care. Good luck.
Chairman Portman.
Hey,
Long time no see, which is probably a good thing, right?
how is it going? We have to get together eventually and talk about this legal deal.
Yeah, I know, I did get the most recent one from Fulton, my wife, so we'll,
Yeah, we're gonna put a spreadsheet together, you know.
Yeah,
what I can do, I can share the one that I created, and you can kind of cross-reference it.
Oh, that's good,
And
Mike.
adjust it on
Yeah.
paper draft for it.
You know, Mike is coming next month.
Coming next month because, to where, planning commission?
Yeah, well,
Certified survey map.
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah, you got your CSM to do, right?
Yeah, and we're gonna get a liquor license like it already, you know.
sign, I think this one will be CSM and sign permit.
Oh, yeah, the sign, yeah.
But just, gotta just confirm that same with the neighbor with that, I mean, height today and raise concerns and issues and stuff, so I know that, so that's bring back more.
He calls me all the time, and I explain to him, you know, because he says, well, when's he getting his permit? I said, he's working on it. He doesn't have the permit yet. He doesn't believe it, you know. And he's never, I don't
Are
get
there
it.
any access issues? I mean, he keeps, remember at those public hearings, they said you didn't have access, proper access or something. Is there
As far as the driveway and,
Yeah, all that.
yeah, that's all driveway, it's just, this lot line is in a couple spots within the 5 feet. Side yard setbacks, that's where Sean said, well, we have to cut it back to 5 feet. And then we're basically creating, we have the existing 9-foot driveway, and then we're putting in grass paved, just so aesthetically it still looks like it fits in.
Looks like a rural driveway.
So it looks like a driveway, and then the rest of it is drivable, but it's grass, it's got reinforcement paving. I don't know, Chief LD has been there, we walked the site, we walked.
You can get an ambulance in there.
Yeah. Oh, you know what? The ambulance will be near the road, and the other side we have the fire ambulance, the pump trucks, and that, so.
Oh, okay, good.
I don't know, I mean, that.
Your CSM will show the driveway access.
All of them?
Yeah, for the,
Well, for the CSM, I think it was like 8, and the survey, 4, and the stormwater management. Well, they didn't do, so there's 3 parcels. The CSM is carving out 2. So if we would have done the third, then we would have had to do, the big problem is the river. So they have to do high water mark, and then overall, the engineering just for the civil is gonna be right on $40,000 for that.
How's your water and drainage when it's wet?
Yeah, so we have a stormwater management pond that's gonna be by the, off of the courtyard
Yeah,
next to the parking lot.
So you can get some drainage there.
Yeah, and then the grade is gonna be increased in the driveway. When you're at the road, you can see a little bit of suppression, so it's like 1.5 to the main front farm field and then about 2.5 to the back. So that parking lot is gonna be raised to 2 feet. So that creates the negative range into the pond, so. It'll actually help the rest of the site to have that
I was
pond,
just
because
gonna
it'll be
say-
a relief for.
Right, because it just fills up.
Yeah, from the one side, from where the house site is to the lowest part of the property, knocked on like the drainage ditch. I think was like 2.5 to 3 feet. So,
change in elevation.
Yeah, so you can get the flow better. The drainage from the house and the barn.
yeah.
Who's your engineer?
JSE. They're out of, I'm working with Dave Roberts and Jessica Johnson. Project manager.
Are you happy?
Yeah, I mean, that goes with territory, doing everything that has to be done.
Oh, this guy is on the local board? Oh, he is. Oh, he is on the local board. But that doesn't mean he has authority to come in. Oh, no, but you got later. Your system catches up. Well, I'm following you up.
Yeah. Oh my God, cause I used to work real cool back in Metro Road.
Right. Oh, yeah. Yeah, right.
I didn't think his comments were inappropriate. He just said I'm a member of this organization, but he didn't represent that he was speaking on behalf of the organization. Today, I think he went a little over.
He went over the top. Yeah. I thought so.
Well, wouldn't that be part of the record? If the board gave him authority?
I mean, they're a little more informal, but you know.
But the bottom line is, I just don't think that organization is.
Where the students? Oh. Say yay.
They said the organization.
Maybe
Well, if I get a
maybe
letter,
maybe
if I get a letter back from the school,
How you doing?
maybe
Good. I'll speak those people over you.
I was just as a side.
In the middle, you know, but not as bad. I felt so bad. Very sportful.
yeah, and I don't even care. It's a revenue.
Yeah. Talk, yeah. Yeah, dragging you the often is, but careful. Yeah, we're still working through some of the new back on the Brookfield. Or CSM.
They must remember.
Oh, no, they called us by name. Yeah, they called us by name. They called little stuff like that.
You gotta stay for this meeting afterwards, John?
Yep. I've been wondering why in some.
Is it plan commission and town? Do they have a lot on the agenda?
Yeah, I was actually graduating from that. Sometimes in English or you want to do business minor. So I like writing that. During the presentation.
All right, hello everyone. It is 5 o'clock, so we will do concluding comments and we'll hear those from the town of Waukesha and town of Vernon. Town of Vernon, would you like to start, or are you flipping it over to Waukesha?
Town of Waukesha is going to be closed.
All right, town of Waukesha, please.
Thanks again for the opportunity to speak. I want to make a comment, and Supervisor Durr touched on it, but about the status quo comment, and I mean no disrespect to a fellow town resident, Mr. Whipple, but he asserted approval of the cooperative agreement would add a layer of government. Now, I'll touch that first and then the status quo issue. To me, his assertion makes absolutely no sense whatsoever about adding a layer of government. If you look at the sign on the wall behind there, Town of Waukesha, established in 1843, a great place to live. If I were to modify that sign, at least for tonight's purposes, I'd probably change it to say, Town of Waukesha, a great, lean and mean place to live, because that in fact is what we are. I mean, town government compared to city government is an extremely efficient way to deliver services. And clearly there's an argument to make that most towns don't deliver the scope of services that cities do. They're fundamentally different. But just a couple of things to underscore the point. Our mill rate, current mill rate here in the town of Waukesha is $1.80 to 1,000. The city of Waukesha's is over $10. Now, I'm not saying that in a judgmental way. They're running a different operation. We have 5 full-time employees. They correct me, but I believe they have over 500 full-time employees. We're comparing apples to oranges. So to be sure, the scope of services which we provide compared to the city is nowhere near comparable, but to suggest that anyone in leadership role in the town of Waukesha has any interest whatsoever, or has ever had, as long as I've known people who have led this town, in growing government or adding a level of government is absolutely preposterous. Regarding the issue that some have made, suggesting that you ought not look favorably on this proposed cooperative agreement because it does nothing more than perpetuate the status quo, at least as it pertains to the current boundary between the town of Vernon and the town of Waukesha. I fundamentally reject that proposition. I put that in the form of a couple of questions, which I jotted down. Since when is it necessary, since when is discord a necessary predicate to harmony? In a lot of things, I don't think it is. Chairman Fortner has outlined in great detail all the positive reasons for our 2 respective communities to cooperate. Where is it written that municipalities must engage in a border war or have some kind of a territorial dispute before they can enter into a formal cooperative agreement to maintain existing boundaries in perpetuity? I could go on and on with questions of that nature, but to suggest that you somehow or other need to be discordant before you can cooperate, I reject that in its entirety. Thank you again for the opportunity. Appreciate your being here at the town of Waukesha and listening to us.
Okay, thank you very much. Town of Vernon?
Thank you, Chairman Fisher. Carl Fortner again, Town Chairman of the Town of Vernon. setting the common border is important. Status quo is important. The border is not fixed, contrary to some of these comments we've heard this afternoon. One town could incorporate. There could be a change in state law. Even our friend, the commercial real estate developer, who was commenting not as a resident, but more as a profit-seeking developer, he's figured out the reason. If one town incorporates, annexation comes into play. And why is this so important to him? It's because annexation is a tool developers use to get what they want. They play one community against the other. And it's not always in the best interest of the community residents. He is wrong, though, about his comment about the layers of bureaucracy in government. The agreement actually reduces it. It waives extraterritorial zoning and plat review. It reduces bureaucracy. He should be applauding us for that. As to services, political boards change election to election. Vernon's town board has changed. I've outlined that in our Village of McGuanago Village of McGuanago Cooperative Plan when we wrote comments in an appendix about how and why our board at Vernon changed. So, and I also, in my opening comments, I deferred to Mr. Fisher, because I was not on the Vernon board when the town of Vernon and the town of Waukesha were discussing shared services. That was 2 years ago. He was on the board, I was not. The Shared Services Committee ensures continuity year over year, even if political boards do change. It also, services are also important, and it's important to set the border because we need to know where the border is in order to properly plan for our service delivery of our services on into the future. This is why we included the Shared Services Committee in the plan. This is also another reason why we included the Joint Planning Committee in the plan as well. The City of Waukesha comments, the gist of them, you heard them. They claim there is no need for a cooperative plan in a status quo, in quotes here, air quotes, and this is not a criteria in the statute. The City of Waukesha apparently is not in favor of neighboring towns cooperating. We are trying to establish on an ongoing mechanism, an environment to cooperate. As Chairman Fisher indicated, we don't have to be suing each other like the City of Waukesha likes to sue at times, or at least appears to, its neighbors, in order to cooperate. We're trying to prevent problems in the future. To complain about advisory committees, our committees are advisory, is nearly stunning to me. Every municipality has committees which are merely advisory. In some, the city comments, we don't believe they have any merit and they're irrelevant. We need to focus on the criteria in the statute. Sewer and water are not a criteria. Status quo is not a criteria. Whether a committee is advisory is not a criteria. Whether we can jointly plan or share services without a cooperative plan is not a criteria to reject the plan. Merely stating that the cooperative plan doesn't meet the statutory criteria does not explain why it doesn't. Our cooperative plan does explain why. It's in the plan, and it does meet the criteria. On their lastly, on their comment that we received no letter from Waukesha County Parks and Planning, that is also not part of the criteria. We did send everyone we were supposed to notices. We again asked Waukesha County Parks and Planning for their comments just recently, and we view a no response as a no comment, and so we did consider their no comment. Obviously, if they do send us something, we'll forward it on. That's all I have in closing. Thank you again for the opportunity to provide comments. Have a safe drive back, and we'll see if we'll have further resident comments here till 6.
Yes, thank you. Yes, like we said, we will be here until 6 for public testimony. Just a reminder to everyone, you're welcome to submit additional supporting materials until Monday, February 24th. You can send them to us by traditional mail or email. Our email address is on the bottom of the agenda, so please feel free to send your materials there. Again, the deadline is 10 days, Monday, February 24th, and then we have to issue our decision by March 23rd. And we know that you've requested an early determination, but as you know, you were at our public hearing the other night. We're having tonight's public hearing, we're having another public hearing next week, so we are reviewing several of these all at the same time, so an early determination may not be feasible. But thank you very much for your participation tonight, and we will stand informal until we receive additional public testimony slips, and I'll check in about 20 minutes, if not before. Thank you. Would you like to offer public testimony? Okay. We will hear your testimony now if you'd like. All right, we are going to go to public testimony. Ms. Fortner, when you're ready.
Sure. My name is Kristen Fortner, and I'm a Vernon resident. I'm here tonight to provide a resident's perspective on this cooperative plan. First, I want to thank all the Vernon officials for negotiating the border agreement with the town of Waukesha. I was at the last public hearing at the Big Bend Elementary School for public comments to the Wisconsin DOA on the Village of Mugwanago plan. This is a much better plan than the Mugwanago plan, and it is very well thought out. It addresses all of the criticisms of the Mugwanago plan. It leaves the border exactly where it is today. This takes care of the area being compact. There is no islands or hodgepodge borders over the next 30 years. And as a resident, I will know where the border is at all times. There are not islands of land from people joining the municipality next to them, stranding them from any services. It takes care of all the required services, including emergency services like EMT, fire department, police, maintenance, snow plowing, grass cutting, fixing the roads, dog licenses, burning permits, large item pickup, cable services, and so on. The residents know exactly who, how, and when the services are going to be provided. All of our citizens' needs are being taken care of in this agreement. It provides for joint planning area so both communities can have input over the land use at our common border. And I just want to show my support for this new agreement. Everyone I know is happy with this boundary agreement, and I really appreciate all the time that went into this to get it right. And I hope you please approve this agreement, and thank you for listening to the citizens' comments.
All right, thank you very much. Again, we will stand informal until about 5:30, where I'll do another check-in. Thank you.
I'm not very sharp, but I figured it out right.
You don't mind, because it's gonna be. Yeah, I don't mind. Okay. Yeah, so what I'll do is I'll cancel out your absentee, because you said you were.
I'm wondering,
Oh, yes, Debbie?
yeah, did Todd McCullough get his?
I don't know. Fred, did Todd get his ballot? I'm sorry? Did Todd get his ballot?
I haven't talked to him.
Well, Kristen did ask for one, she didn't get hers, that's why we're wondering, did Todd get his?
Send it to him. Sorry, I'll text him.
Yeah, if you don't mind, Fred, just to be, you know, because I wanted to be able to vote.
And that's, when is the vote?
Next Tuesday.
Yeah.
And how will we,
Yeah, how do you get it back? You know, she's gonna be back in time.
I'm gonna be back in time now. I wasn't before, but now I am.
You text him and let me know tomorrow, because if they didn't, I would email him the ballot and email him
Oh,
the stuff
good.
and he'd send it back.
From that little laptop.
Yeah.
God, she's got 3 appointments. IV, blood transfusion, dementia, and non-chemo.
I bet
She's got 3 things, man. We spent like 10, 12 hours with her.
He's a good boy. And
Oh my gosh.
Hopefully she's drinking water.
your baby.
oh, I thought you said John.
No, I said,
Months ago, she started drinking Gatorade, and she said, I gave her a glass, she said she
Yeah.
didn't like it.
It's like everything about that.
Electrolytes. It comes in different flavors.
Yeah, it comes in different flavors, or mix it with some juice. You can blend the taste off really quick.
Or mix it
Orange
with water.
juice. Yeah. Orange juice, cranberry juice, any of those.
Yeah.
Would dilutes the taste of it.
Right.
I could slug a quart of it, just slug a quart. I just slug a quart of it.
Just drink it. I don't even taste it.
Right, you just slug it down, right? This is my second bottle of water at this meeting.
I drank 3 at work.
Yeah, I know, that's what I mean. I'm thirsty, I'm gonna slug this one.
Oh, and I had a cup of tea.
So this
Again,
is,
nice job.
all right. We'll see you.
I don't know, you wrote a nice presentation.
Oh, thanks. Last minute, he's like, you coming to the meeting? I'm like, I'm writing a presentation now, hold on. I'm like typing it up at work.
But maintain your energy, okay?
Somebody's got it here.
Well, I figure I can't just come and talk negatively. I gotta come with the positives too, right?
especially the 11. No, but tomorrow, Chris will go in and cancel out that ballot. So, you know, when you come in to vote, then there won't be any, because I'll run the poll books on Friday night or Saturday.
Okay.
Then it'll be closed.
Sounds good. Yeah, then you don't have to get it to me.
Because at least 4 people, besides yourself, didn't get theirs.
And you sent it to our address, right? So that,
That
Yeah.
was a Samuel Crane.
yeah, because,
Yeah.
because,
Cause I worry about my mail. My mail
your
doesn't
mail
always get
doesn't.
to my house.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. I have all my mail coming to his house.
It's a big bad post office address, so the Schuylkill delivers.
Yeah,
Yeah, it does
We
it
got
all.
all those
They screw it up
taxes.
all
I
the
get my
time.
neighbor's mail all the time. I've gotten people's mail from Windy Lake. So if I'm getting other people's mail, I know other people are getting my mail.
I know Lorraine got one year, it was like 2 years later.
Yeah. It's bad.
I know people get mad at me and it's like, I put right in my letter, don't count on the post office. If you want it, they can drop it off in the 24/7, you know, the mailbox.
And the scary thing was the year I had my passport mailed to me. And I'm like, can I pick you up in person? They're like, no, we're gonna mail it to your house. I'm like, it's never gonna get to my house.
That's terrible.
I was terrified. But
But
it
it did
came.
come.
It came. We were
It
okay.
did come? Oh, okay. Oh, my
But
God.
yeah, that was bad. I was sitting there, I'll never miss it. Like, I don't know if it's like a flat.
Oh, God.
It's a 50-50 whether I get my mail.
And you get your neighbor's mail too?
Oh, all the time. All the time. I get a big stack of it.
And your neighbor gets your mail too?
Yeah, my other neighbor's gotten mine before, but I know my rebates and stuff they've gotten too. Remember now it's rebates.
You don't keep them, do they?
No.
Okay.
But one time they kept it, I was like looking for this rebate for like months, and finally they came over and like, we thought it was our rebate, but it's yours.
Oh,
We gotta exchange mail all the time. It's terrible.
how's little Goliath doing?
He's good. He's loving the snow.
Does he like the snow?
He just loves it.
Does he?
He starts screaming, he bolts outside, he rolls in it.
Oh,
I remember
upside
when he was a
down.
puppy, there was just one, as it melts down in the spring, there's like 1 pound left of like driveway snow. So it's going down and going down. He'd run out there and wait.
Where's it going? Where's it going?
But I have to like grind my treats to come back inside. I'm like, treats, come back inside. I'm cold.
does he have a big heavy down then? Do you have, when you brush him out after
Yeah,
the
so
winter?
like he's got like a furry, soft, like rabbit fur down here next to his skin.
Uh-huh.
Then he's got another layer of fur that's like waterproof, like real coarse, that goes on top of it.
Petting a bear.
Oh, you're kidding.
Yeah, so when you pet him, he's not very soft, but the soft fur is down underneath the coarse fur.
So that's why he doesn't get cold, is he's got
Yeah,
that
'cause the
barrier.
snow goes on the barrier, the waterproof barrier.
And he just shakes it off. He
He
doesn't,
just shakes it out.
and it doesn't melt on his coat either. It comes in as snow.
Comes in as snow.
Really?
Yeah.
Like some dogs, they get snow on them and then it melts because their body feels melty.
Yeah,
he
yeah.
walks
Then they
in
get
and
wet
he's
and
like
then they get,
full of
then they
snow.
get chilled.
Yeah, they do.
And then he's like,
Yeah.
he just like, he
weird.
comes in with snow, he
There's
shakes
like
it
a
off. and-
waterproof layer, like,
Does it bother his paws at all?
yeah, sometimes it's paws.
Yeah,
The
that's
salt
gonna
that
Salt.
I shake.
Yeah,
The
yeah.
road salt.
So I try and keep them off the road, and I don't salt my driveway, so.
Yeah.
I salt under my garage door though, so that doesn't get frozen to the ground.
Macy was waving at us, so I'm gonna have to
Yep,
go.
go for it.
So you can vote on Tuesday, you're gonna go.
Yeah, I'm gonna go cancel it out, Chris, so that way when you vote on Tuesday, you won't have any. Yeah, because if there's a, not that they still can't vote, but it just makes it cleaner.
Right, you don't want any,
No,
you want people to blow up the line,
yeah. I hope there is one, but, you know,
like Barb one day, during the primary, I walked into the vote and, nobody said anything. So this was much too exciting to hear. Barb said, yeah, we need some excitement. I'm like, really? Okay, I'd like to vote provisionally. Not that kind of excitement.
of all chief inspectors, oh my God. You say that to any group, they freak out, it's like, so you wait, I mean, oh my God, you say that to any group. You gotta, Carol, if you have any, which I know you don't, you have got to listen to that debate at the Wisconsin election, all those attorneys, Carl, we're just gonna ignore the law. I can't believe an attorney would say.
You know, and here's the election commission. Why aren't they telling the legislature in advance, you've got a problem with this?
Especially if they know that the last two presidential elections.
Last two presidentials, like, this is not a new problem created last year in December on some, budget bill or something they jammed through when Walker was leaving office or something. This has been around for years.
Yeah. I'll give him it's a mess, but my God, they ignore the law.
Should have been picked.
All right.
All right, I'm gonna go see.
Take care, Chris, and say hi to Mama.
Call us or something if somebody else comes in.
Yep, I'll let you know. I'll text you.
All right.
snicker at the silly people out there, but not kidding. Yes, I did. We carpooled. I noticed it properly. I can't tell you how often that comes up. That was a good meeting though. I mean, you might not have thought that, but after the fact, boy, they just, at least it got them, I mean, the outcome always wasn't the best, but at least it gets them talking with all the other communities. But, you know, when he said off the record, the drawback, 'cause I've had Carl talk to the mayors of Muskego and Berlin, great meetings. But you gotta keep doing that, you know, you gotta keep talking. I feel sorry for you guys. Are you guys swamped? Oh gosh. You didn't listen to that meeting yesterday. You don't watch Wisconsin Eye, do you? You didn't hear did you watch that teleconference with the Wisconsin Election Commission about the absentee voters? Oh, it was really interesting. Yes. Yeah, the commission went against the federal and state law that says you have to send your absentee ballot within, the federal law is 45 days and the state law is 47 days, that they have to be sent in advance. Well, for the state elections, the certification and canvassing isn't really done by that time. So you have to send out your federal ballot, your A ballot, and then you have to send out a B ballot, and then you have to open the B ballot and make sure it's marked, and if it's not marked, you gotta use the A ballot, and it's like, and City of Milwaukee allegedly told Wisconsin Election Commission that they weren't gonna follow the law. Oh, and the clerks were going crazy. It just was interesting to listen to the discussion from the commission members, and then they had you know, the Elections Commission had a conference with all the clerks this morning explaining, from what they said, they said that the law hasn't been followed for the last two presidential elections. But you think they would change the law?
So you really go with like A ballot or B ballot?
You go with the B ballot if it's marked. If the B ballots, if they never get a B ballot, if you get both ballots, you go with the B ballot. If B ballot's not marked, then you go with the A ballot. But if they voted for presidential on the A ballot and they didn't vote for the presidential on the B ballot, their presidential vote doesn't count because they didn't, you know. Can you imagine the poor elector?
What if they vote for two different people?
Because you only can take one ballot and you can't examine. You can open the B ballot, you can't look to see how they voted, but if there's any marks, you feed it in. And, you know, so if there's a contrary between the A and the B, it doesn't matter because the A would never count. I mean, you keep the ballot for canvassing purposes and indicate that you received both, but you only count the one. I mean, if there's no marking on the B ballot, then you go back to the A ballot. So now we're waiting for a legal opinion from our attorneys, our municipal attorneys, because if we don't follow the law, even though, I don't know, it's a mess. Never dull. Well, honest to God, well, I don't know how true it is because I'm not in Madison, but from what, you know, our state representatives say that they're always changing, election laws change all the time. I don't know. I know finance laws don't change. In Madison? Do the laws change in your department a lot?
No, actually, just with other laws. This area, since the 50s. Because it's difficult to get people to agree on what to change, how to change it, or
I can't.
the same. So the laws that we find out here are remarkably stable.
So they've been is that when, in the 50s, is that when Oak Creek, Franklin, Muskego, and Vernon became cities?
Yeah.
That's what I thought.
And the laws were created in response to those legislation processes today.
They were big, they were towns.
Good towns, right?
I know my parents used to live in the town of Lake, which was in Milwaukee County, is now in St. Francis, Cudahy, South Milwaukee. village of Menominee Falls, that's a huge village. And then you look at the village of Big Bend or Shaniqua or Butler, they're. Yeah, and I can't, when you talk to clerks, you have clerks that have 16 people in their town. I don't, I feel sorry for the elections commission because can you imagine trying to do election law for people that have thousands and thousands and people that have 14 voters, like, you know. Yeah, and did you see how Racine and Oshkosh were hacked? Their city, that's scary. Kathy, you want me to move? Do you have plan commission and town board after this?
Yeah. Commission and town board.
What time does it start?
6:30.
Well, who's coming from the town? Ken?
No, Amy usually comes to us.
Oh, does she?
Yeah, we're gonna put this one over there. This one's a heavier one, smaller one. Yeah, she's got it.
Who's doing, it's obviously Shoreland, whose property is it?
It's, Amy Hudson right on the corner, right? Right next to us. Town line and 164.
She's in Shoreland?
That's water, yeah.
Where's the water?
Well, it comes across, there's a waterway goes
Oh.
through
Yeah.
there. Drainage.
Oh, jeez. What is she doing? A CU?
Storage.
Oh. Those are both popular.
Yes, they
Yeah,
are.
they
We turned them down.
Three of them. We got three of them on our agenda.
Not kidding.
No,
How many do you have?
right, two this time. Yeah. But we just last week, the storage, yeah, but we increased their storage capacity. And Storage Masters is part of our TIF, and they're increasing.
How does the county feel about storage?
They don't say anything, they don't say anything about storage. They're not putting the buildings in the area, so, in the county area.
In the Shoreland?
Yeah, in the shoreline, so it's town. Buildings are all going on the town line. For town purposes.
What's the zone there?
We are B2, they're gonna rezone it to B3.
Oh,
And, for the county, it had to be rezoned from A1 to B.
will your board come ahead of, how many people are on your plan commission, 5?
Five plus.
Bob, are you on plan commission?
Yes. He's our board member.
Oh, okay.
Board member.
Do you like plan commission? What do you like better, board or plan commission? You don't like neither? Oh, I love plan commission.
I'd rather take my evenings with my wife.
Bob, your wife is in Maryland, is she? Oh, she's so nice.
Blinded by love, I guess.
She had a miscarriage of judgment for a while, about 4 years ago.
She's really involved in the Lions Club, isn't she?
You always have one, yeah. I'm trying to talk her into joining us. I live on Mount Board, with my wife and daughter here, so.
if she doesn't do it, Sean
No,
does it.
Sean
right?
does it, right.
I asked her for a packet. I said, do you have a staff report for our packet? She goes, the county doesn't do that.
Yes.
Well, it would be nice.
So I'm just gonna do the quick 5:35 check-in. No additional public testimony slips have been received. We will come back and anytime we do receive one, or else we will come back at 6 to adjourn. Thank you.
You can stay till 6?
What else do we have to talk about? Oh, the agenda. I should look, I started.
Oh, you can look at it.
We can talk about that. I think we gotta talk about it here.
What else do we got going, anything?
We're meeting with the village of Waukesha. He called.
Really?
Red Line, he called.
Better late than never, I guess.
And he said, any possibility on this cooperative plan? I'm like, well, we have 2 days. But, you know, be willing to sit and talk to you. I said, I got 2 things for you too. And what about this water pipe in our walkway? And the bridge rebacking over, yes, I don't know about your subdivision just across the river, but who's gonna provide it in because both ways are closed.
Did they go in there right away? They weren't supposed to.
Well, I don't think they did, but, I mean, if he vertically bored it underneath the parking lot of the apartment complex, okay, fine, it's done. But that doesn't answer my question.
That's legal, isn't it?
That's legal,
Yeah,
but my
that's what
question.
they didn't want to do.
That's what they didn't wanna do, and I don't know what maybe they're waiting till spring now.
Yeah.
But my question to him is, you know, you have a developers agreement, you said 8 inch pipe, now you're making it at 12. Why?
Yeah,
Why do they need all that water in a mini storage facility?
yeah. Somebody's called them. I'm gonna annex next week, could you put in a 12-inch pipe?
Wasn't that Ogden, the builder?
Yeah. Those guys, they're just,
Oh, yeah. Did Fred say anything when you asked him about it?
no, I just said I wanna talk about those 2 items too. Okay. Oh, yeah, so, it was over, Harry said something about that. That was counting the days. It was either today or yesterday or the day after last.
Yeah.
We are, we're gonna talk to them every 3 weeks. Nice to meet you. Twice over.
Mm-hmm.
He said, yeah. Because it's not gonna look anything like the meeting.
And I looked at it too, and there's half the time. Yeah, yeah.
And it's like, wait a minute. And you ask everybody in the town, want to be part of New Berlin, Skido, Big Bend, or stay together. Overwhelmingly stay together.
Right, right.
You know, we give people a choice.
All of the border provinces have one people. The mayor is on that,
Brookfield,
Brookfield, or was it
Waukesha, Carol Lombardi and, Luber, Kate Luber, yep.
who was Oconomowoc was one who said hell no. Was
Right.
Waukesha the other one?
Well, yeah, her board didn't support Carol.
You know, she had a plan, fabulous plan, it worked out with the mayor in Muskego was.
Yeah, Dave DeAngelis, now the administrator in Elm Grove,
For a
yep.
long time, like
Yep.
18 years or something. he's
Yep,
been in Elm
Jim
Grove.
Gatsky from New Berlin was supportive.
Yes.
They worked with this big plan,
Yeah.
with the judges being the mediators, and everybody had to come create cooperative boundary plans, and resolve all the problems.
Waukesha
And they
got
cut all, we had that big meeting at GE.
Yeah, GE Medical System.
And they had all of this all worked out, and the mayors walked me back to sell it to their boards and said, That was him, but
It all fell apart.
so that's the kind of, that's the way the city.
Oh, that's
City
city.
kind of model.
There's the city of Waukesha is pretty small.
I don't.
It's got housing and everything else. Look at this, school system. Waukesha West is gonna be the school. Here's gonna be the rocky core. So all this stuff. White Rock Elementary School is in this size too.
Well, so is the one down in Sarah.
Is that White Rock?
No, White Rock would I think be over by Frame.
It's over by Frame, right?
Yeah, yeah, this one is down by.
So there's two then. The Waukesha South High School is next to
Yeah, this one is almost a buck south.
Yeah. Right where that expired park and there's a Muslim church there.
You lose your public schools, you lost your city. It's over. It's over. Let's hope we run. Yeah. They didn't say anything about consistency of land.
Second to Chris George or practice. Somebody mentioned something. I mean,
That's the other one you were supposed to.
It's either or. Either or.
either or.
Or you could contact. Yeah, send it to school.
Yeah, I'll call Chris tomorrow. See what he says. I used to all regional planning.
Kurt Bauer,
Yeah.
and then it was Phil Evanson.
Oh, he
and
was
then
so
even-
nice,
and
yeah.
Who was after him forever?
Beaver,
Beaver was this, that's what.
no.
I thought it was Suggs, I can't think of his name.
I can picture him
He was there a long time.
after Phil.
And he just left. So I don't know anybody there.
Well, Chris I know only from, when he had a land use issue over by us.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, the whole county, Waukesha County, we should incorporate everybody somehow or another.
Well,
And
the
we don't-
goal was to have everybody.
Well, that would work too, but,
Someone would go away, some would stay down to this property. I mean, Iowa loves to stay a little fire, rural town, with their one golf course and,
They're happy.
they're happy.
right, and that's
Wanna
okay
stay under county zoning.
That's okay too.
And cut their deal with Elson and Summit and now they're just alone.
So they have board agreements with both municipalities.
I don't think they're.
Melissa said that her board meeting next week there. Is there? Why? Oh. Really? You're kidding.
I feel sorry for her. She doesn't want to work. She doesn't want to be there. She can't afford not to be there. She can't get a key somehow.
Really?
She is, seriously.
Well, you know who makes big money? That's Kathy Collins.
Oh, yeah, that's enough. I hear that down in McWanago, people are running for the board.
One woman.
Maybe one person.
Well, what's her name? Ruth,
No, not in the Ruth Nicholson.
yeah, oh, she calls me all the time.
It's the classic, she's on a private road. We quit plowing because there was no real reason to put some plowing. She got mad. The county does. It's a ministry.
Franklin or Hales Corners or Greendale or something, right?
She lives right from this. They do their public records inspection. Why? So I don't know if she's out to get Kathy Hendy or just to get Kathy or.
Oh, Kathy's really nice.
Could even transfer to the board.
She's got anything to worry about. 75 grand. Oh, I had to get that report because I wanted to see what Rupert Noki did for him, didn't they?
We're gonna have to do that for us.
Oh, yeah.
Too. But, you know, I did notice, Pheasant Ridge or Run or whatever they call themselves,
They're charging everybody $2,500.
for a stupid light pole and a wheel. Like, if they can charge each
Well, you
homeowner
should-
$2,500,
You should
they
see
could,
that.
we could charge them $2,500 for an impact fee. I mean, if that's the.
Well, nobody's really complaining on it now, the 2,500.
Right, that's what I mean, that's what I mean. And ours is, what is ours?
Well, probably now it's like 502.
Something like that.
Yeah, it goes up incrementally every year.
So, we could raise ours, I mean, if it's.
Yeah, you just have,
It
we don't
has
even
to
have,
be
we don't even have a balance.
Done, I know, that's why we have
And
to
I don't
do it.
think that, you know, I mean, any of us could update it, but I don't think it's qualified unless you're a professional.
Well, I don't know. You gotta figure out what all the national averages are, and you
Oh,
can
that
do
would-
all of that.
I mean, it'd take a lot of work. The thing is, if you hire somebody, they have a database.
I don't think it'd be hard to do.
Well, but you gotta figure out where you're deficient and how much the taxpayers have to pay versus the new
New
revenue.
growth.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Okay, wow. Go for it. You have it.
Yeah, because
Write it and I'll check it and that'll be the end of it.
Yeah.
I just have to do a stormwater report in March. So I gotta get John, I need your information.
Here's Weenie's.
Oh, I like that. That's a challenge. Yeah, but like, I don't know, the guy that I work with at this, he's so smart, the guy from the DNR. I can't think of his name. It's like Bernstein or something. I mean, he doesn't write it, but if I get stuck.
All right.
Well, I'm gonna boogie, John.
All right, you're gonna send me that stuff.
I'll email it. Good night, ladies and gentlemen. Safe journey home.
We'll, talk tomorrow, I suppose.
Yep, yeah, let me
Get a
know.
better draft tomorrow.
Yeah, and like I said, the agenda's just, if there's things you need to add or take off,
We just need, I think we gotta put on the village report as well, cooperative plan, so I can do the agenda. And it's expired, the 90 days expired.
yeah. Did you know?
No, Rhode Island is not doing that.
Oh.
But it hadn't expired yet.
Oh, okay.
No, I never, that's not on the agenda, because I didn't know shot about that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so remind me if I forget. Because I just tried to capture,
I think we got a lot of it.
there's a couple things you'll see like John needs, he needs some form signing to say, that's one. I mean, nobody's, it's a minuscule form, but it still needs the board for you to approve. Somebody's gonna sign it.
Do you have thoughts or food around what different comments on this one?
And I think we should probably put together a group of people where we can let them speak.
Oh, the city comments.
Yeah, maybe look at the city comments, hopefully specifically.
Did you see how we've done the city comments? Every paragraph we've read out. Oh, we did 3 mayors letters.
Really?
Oh my God. See the detail. I mean, everybody has the efforts to chime in and make their comments and, oh yeah, we did. Christie, the financial consultant. Yeah, they're pretty good. Well, this is, yeah, most of the letters are, but, we decided, well, we're gonna do the same thing. Brookfield's comments have like 48 pages long. When what they see is true. I printed them up by mistake, I hit print. I went, oh shit.
Yeah, you're friends with her. Oh, yeah. Oh, okay. I was,
Well spent.
I was busy when my staff members come over and said, you know, this Dr. Graves, the superintendent lives at our facility. What is going on? I said, no. I said to Nora.
You need an appointment?
I said to Nora, school bus is very supportive.
Thank you.
You know, I said, Dr. Tom, and, you know, I don't know this, one, I don't get, the superintendent of school not as well as I knew Stroll, you know. What's his name now? Sean,
So Counselor, if I make a request to incorporate all the testimony out the door to it, yeah.
All right. Hello, everyone. It is 6 o'clock, so I'm declaring this officially adjourned. Thank you very much.
Drive safely back.
We'll see you in a week.
Should I come next week just for a friendly face? We criticize the city of Waukesha why they're putting their nose in this, but the town of Vernon shouldn't put our nose into you and the town of Vernon.
So we convinced the driver to stop at the Pine Cone?
So, Mr. Chairman,
Don't you have to stop at the Pine Cone?
Not one of the 2-pound ones, just the
I know it
99
was
cent one.
contentious, but speaking she has a
Get with
And
Village
you
of
get to
Quantico.
carry the box.
They did a couple of things. One is our land
No, we
use
did an all-night plan commission.
We're not. We have a
Okay.
290 inconsistent. I said, that's an easy one to prove. Look look at McWanago's high-density residential and commercial areas for the detached area, and look at Vernon's. That's easy. I said, I don't have to spend a lot of time here. Just look at it. It's in existence.
So they have to be consistent.
That's right. And I said, second, shared services, or services. That plan required 10, there's a 10-year phase, 20-year phase, and 30-year phase. But you could jump ahead of your phase if you wanted to. The landowner could. So you could have one in the 30-year phase, 3 miles from McWanago, jumping to McWanago. And I'm like, who's gonna
On an individual
base?
property basis?
I said, who's gonna provide services there? Who's gonna plow the road, pick up the garbage?
For that 50 feet of frontage.
Yeah, my wife gets up there and says, we're gonna pick up our plows and leave it when we go by. And so we hammered them on that. And those are the two big things.
So
That
if
and the
they would have
compact-
not
and then
had-
it's- and then the size of the area was way
So
too
why
big.
did they have the ability to phase them out? Is that something,
The boards negotiate.
is that something that one side wanted?
I have no idea. I wasn't on the board. That's
No, I realize
Yeah,
that.
it's just like all of that was done in secret. And it was just like, I don't get it. I think McWanago wanted it.
The ability to phase it out.
Yeah. If the property owner wanted it, they could go early. And so while all this is going on, we had one property owner right in the middle of phase 2 advertise his farm for sale, and it said right in his marketing description, able to create a village, he even used the word village island, able to create a village island. So I get up there and say, I'm not making this up. We're giving him his real estate ad.
So what was the timeline? So, was it elected and then the election and you won, or was it you ran and won and then you were able to get it rejected?
Here's the timeline. We had public hearings in the fall, and you could tell they were gonna jam it through the referendum. People asked, can't you put this to a referendum vote? Town board didn't even take it up. And so they approved it in January of last year, of 19. They approved it. So what my group did, the citizens group, we got 900 people on a petition to force a referendum